Talk to Me is without a doubt one of my favorite examples of me being so utterly wrong with my expectations for a movie, and it's a massive part of why I've been drifting away from engaging with marketing for movies over the last few years.
Hey, didn't you do an entire video on one still from Nosferatu and then go to a movie you had no interest in seeing just because the Nosferatu trailer was playing, and then left after the trailer and made a video about it, and then made another video about it when the trailer got released on YouTube?
Talk to Me was a movie that I thought looked like toe cheese. For whatever reason, the trailer I saw just gave me the impression of a really generic possession movie, and I pretty much disregarded it, but man, it's a good feeling to be so wrong about a movie and have it actually be awesome. I love Australian horror. I think that the folklore of that region has inspired some absolutely phenomenal films, from the unsettling, tragic dread of Lake Mungo, the symbolism and beautiful genius of the Babadook, the disturbing, super violent Wolf Creek films, and many, many more. So it's nice to see an Australian horror film get recognized on a scale like this. Danny and Michael Philippou have run a very successful YouTube channel for over a decade, and for a very long time, it was the case that if a YouTuber came out with a movie, it usually wasn't very good, but that, thankfully, wasn't the case here at all. I feel like we're getting more and more films these days that are just like these ridiculously impressive directorial debuts with, you know, Robert Eggers coming onto the screen with The Witch, Ari Aster starting off with Hereditary, Jordan Peele exploding with Get Out, and with the Philippou brothers coming out with Talk to Me as their first feature-length film. They're showing a hell of a lot of promise for what's in store. Also, my God, how refreshing is it to have a horror movie come out that actually managed to scare me? I love horror, whether it scares me or not, but this one managed to freak me the hell out in a way that very rarely happens. It's a really beautiful thing to see too, because you have these two brothers who have been passionate about their craft and working together for so long, finally getting to make a full feature-length film. The video of them being told that A24 wanted to distribute the film is genuinely heartwarming. That is so nice to see, and their passion translates into the film perfectly. Their commitment to making films in Australia is another thing I have a lot of respect for. They even had an offer to remake the movie in America, which seems extremely redundant anyway, and they turned it down, which was definitely the right move. I actually hadn't seen this since it was in theaters, so it was really great to revisit because I honestly forgot how good Talk to Me actually is. It's also been one that is very requested, and with their new film on the horizon, I figured it was finally time to take a look at Danny and Michael Philippou's thematically rich possession film, Talk to Me.
As soon as she lets it in, it cannot go for more than 90 seconds. Am I clear?
What happens after 90 seconds?
Don't want to stay.
At the core of this film is a very raw portrayal of grief and the path that it can lead you down, primarily as a young person experiencing immense grief and the naive things you may partake in when trying to fill the hole of that connection that was lost. With a story about something so deeply personal, the first priority needs to be making you care about these characters enough to get invested in their emotions. And the reason I'm starting by talking about this right away is because Talk to Me handles this side of things so well. It definitely helps that this film was made by people who are actually young, so you don't get that sense of someone not of a generation trying to replicate the way people talk. So one of the first things that stood out to me about this movie is that the dialogue and character interactions feel so accurate to how people in this age range actually speak to each other. Aside from feeling authentic, these characters are managed insanely well, especially when you consider the runtime of 95 minutes. It's a tough task to try and establish, flesh out, and create satisfying arcs for characters in such a short amount of time, which is why for these horror films that deal with grief in such a deep way, like Hereditary for example, they're often closer to 2 hours. That makes the characters in Talk to Me all the more impressive, because the way the viewer's connection with them is created is simply through them behaving like actual people. There are no big info dumps on anyone, but they're all so well established just through watching the ways they interact that it completely erases any need for more information about them. When you can make people feel like people, then you don't need to sit the audience down and say, so here's a bunch of stuff about them. And that form of creating attachment to characters is way more effective because that's actually how we learn about people in real life. We just hang with them. Mia, our lead character, has a shocking amount of depth to her considering how little we actually know about her beyond the things she's dealing with during the time when the movie takes place. She's playful, she's got a sense of humor, but she's also dealing with the recent death of her mother and is very distant from her father at the moment, feeling that he's not being transparent about the nature of her death. There are some pretty complicated dynamics here, and I loved the way they went about handling them, with Mia spending way more time with her friend Jade and her family after what happened. They've been close for a long time, but it's pretty clear that she's been around a lot more since her mother died because she's trying to avoid speaking with her dad. Everything with Jade's family interacting is really damn good, especially whenever Miranda Otto is in a scene.
You. My daughter's vagina. Prohibited.
Oh my god, Mum, leave the room before I kill everyone.
The neighbors tell me everything.
Oh my gosh, right, shut the door, Mum.
When you get such a strong sense of the family and the dynamics feel as believable as these do, it makes the horror that comes later so much more unsettling because it's happening to people who feel real, and it's tearing apart dynamics that were set up very realistically. This is a genuinely scary movie, without a doubt, but it's a fantastic example of something that set out to use horror as a platform to explore themes like addiction and grief, and those are themes that are serviced much better when you're able to care about these people. There are these little details that go such a long way, especially on rewatches when you have the context of the whole movie. One of my favorites being early on when Mia is talking to Jade about finding a dead kangaroo in the middle of the road and how it upset her. Jade is only half listening while she's on her phone. We learn later on that Jade is getting some pent-up frustration with Mia and the way she's embedded herself into their family since her mother died, and that little note of her not giving her full attention to Mia's story is a nice way of hinting at this early on. There's a bit of an awkward dynamic in this friend group where Jade's current boyfriend Daniel briefly dated Mia, and Mia brings it up like too often.
Daniel can come too, yeah?
If he's touching my Gucci, yes.
Look, we've all been in friend groups with some strange dynamics, and when something like this happens, I don't think an occasional joke about it is a bad thing, but she definitely pushes boundaries too often and makes it pretty clear that she's still got a thing for him and is trying to be able to express that while masking it with a thin veil of being humorous. She's a sweet character who I do feel a lot of sympathy for, but she's very far from perfect, and that's important. It's a genuinely impressive all-around cast because there isn't one weak spot in any of them. Of course, they aren't all like super fleshed out, but they don't need to be. Haley and Joss both still manage to feel believable even though neither of them have much screen time or are particularly important in the overall narrative. They mostly serve as a means for Mia to get involved in the game they're playing, but they each have these moments that do a great job of highlighting some more of their personality without feeling like it's being shoved down your throat. Haley's reaction to each of them walking into the party early on in the movie is a really fun moment, for example.
Oh, and we are babysitting too, apparently. Fuck me.
Haley and Joss both feel like people I knew in school, and that's probably part of why I appreciate their inclusions, to be fair. Something that Talk to Me does extremely well is putting you in the shoes of these characters and making you see things the way that they do, and one great example of that is how Mia's house is cold and gray and feels almost like a freezer at the back of a grocery store where everything is icy and it's lit by lifeless fluorescence, and her father is filmed out of focus in the background with his voice being mixed to sound more distant. And then you get to Jade's place and everything is lit much warmer and it feels more homey. Mia's house feels very clinical and bleak, like a morgue in the basement of a hospital, and Jade's feels like a home. That made me also want to be at Jade's place more than Mia's, so when Jade started ripping into Mia later in the movie, it made it hurt even more because then I'm like, oh, am I also gonna have to spend more time in this depressing ass place? I don't wanna do that. Let me go back to nice, happy, warm place with Miranda Otto being Miranda Otto because I love Miranda Otto so fucking much.
I know everything.
I tried weed one time.
You fuck one goat.
Another point of praise, characters actually react to things appropriately in this movie. Jade's phone call to her mother at the end when she realizes that Mia tricked her and is a very serious danger is a bone-chilling scene that felt so real, and I found especially the way that Sue's character treats Mia after what happened was such an honest look at this mother who absolutely needs someone to blame for what happened to her son, And she's in the right on this one, but her treatment of Mia and the way it shifts throughout the film made her feel very human. Now, that's not to say that everyone in the movie is constantly making the best decisions in the world. Realistic characters and constantly smart characters are not the same thing, especially not when you're dealing with teens for the vast majority of the cast. Many possession movies have used that format to deal with drug use and addiction. It's a really good base for that kind of thing, and it's been done well many times, but I'm not sure I've ever seen a movie use it to explore specifically teen drug use as well as Talk to Me does. Not only do I totally buy into the idea that if there was some sort of possession game you could play at a party, teens would absolutely be doing it every weekend, but it's also pretty much a perfect allegory for drug use and the reasons why people are drawn to these sorts of things. First off, with our understanding of addiction becoming much better, we know that addiction stems far more from searching for a sense of connection than it does from the chemical dependence, which perfectly explains why some people are way more susceptible to falling into this trap than others are, and having the method of entry into this game be a hand that you have to hold is just perfect. It's already a great idea, but then to have it be this colorless, dirty-looking hand makes it an even more compelling piece of symbolism, because it's representing the draw for connection, but also the soullessness of that connection that will come if you give yourself fully to this. Also worth noting that in order for them to play, they have to be restrained to a chair because of the unhinged behavior that comes when you play, and they use a belt for this. So if the drug use metaphor wasn't already clear enough, there you go. The montage scene of them going around the circle and all taking turns playing the game feels exactly like a circle of people in high school trying some short-lasting drug like salvia, or even a more common thing like just watching young people hit like really strong vapes and just laugh at each other as they struggle to sit up for 30 seconds. This is something that's a connection to the spirit world, where every time the spirits are summoned in, they always look scared and confused. It's really dark stuff, but because they're young and they're having a party with their friends and it lasts less than 2 minutes, they just keep going round and round. And the scene is extremely fun. I got to a point where I was feeling like, hell yeah, I'd give that a go, because they do such a good job of putting you in the naive mindset of abusing something that's a hell of a lot more serious than it's being given credit for. One detail that I absolutely loved here is that when Daniel tries the game, he has a horrifying, embarrassing experience that pushed him way farther than he wanted to go. But once the party really gets going and they're lost in the fervor, he winds up going back in over and over. The experience he had the first go around should have been an indication to him that he shouldn't keep going with this. It may not be for him, but he got sucked into seeing everyone else do it and not have a bad time, so despite being shown what can happen, he just goes right back to it because everyone's having so much fun. When we get to the scene after Mia's first time where Riley's freaked out and joins her in the living room, she talks about the feeling of being in the passenger seat and not being in control anymore. And depending on your personality, that's either going to sound really scary or really appealing. But these are teenagers we're talking about, and their personalities haven't really settled in fully yet. So Riley's thoughts on this game are going to very easily be influenced not by the objective experience that people talk about when it's stripped of its emotion, but by the subjective feelings that the person who experienced it had while they were in it. Because Mia is in such a bad place in her life, that feeling of being outside of herself and not needing to be in the driver's seat of her life was freeing. It was a moment of respite and joy, but for someone like Riley, who's not in the same place as her, that may not be the case. But that doesn't matter, because someone older than him who he thinks is cool shared an experience with him without maybe even being aware of the context of why they had that experience, and that's more than enough to plant the seed of him wanting to give it a go for himself. So the big catalytic event of the movie comes when Mia convinces Jade to go to Haley asking to use the hand again, which we'll know later means that Mia sort of made Jade complicit in what happens with Riley, sort of like how sometimes people will use their friends to source drugs and wind up having something go wrong, which really sucks for everyone, of course, but especially for the person who was used to source it. Before we get into it, I have to mention how great the scene where Sue is prying different people to get them to slip up and mention the party that isn't happening is.
What time's everyone getting here?
Getting here for what?
The party.
Is there a party tonight?
Don't bullshit me.
I'm sorry.
Have you got alcohol in your car?
Oh, no, I don't drink, so...
You're good.
Miranda Otto is too good. Man, God bless her. Please put Miranda Otto in more things. So Daniel wants to give it a go, and whatever spirit wound up in him really wanted to draw a wedge between this awkward love triangle by having it taunt Jade and then get really sexual towards Mia before making out with a dog. Nice. That was what I was referring to earlier when I said that Daniel had a really bad time with it, but once the party gets going and everyone's just in the moment and moving at a fast pace, he winds up right back in the chair trying it again along with the rest of them. They really capture that feeling of being caught up in something with a group of people, but it's back at Mia's first turn where a dangerous seed was planted. Now, as someone whose job it is to watch horror movies, I don't find myself getting properly freaked out by them all that often, but this is one of those scenes that scared the shit out of me in the theater, and it did once again when I revisited the movie 3 years later. A massive, massive part of why this works so well and why so much of the horror in this movie lands as well as it does is because of how insanely good Sophie Wilde is in this lead role. So when Mia lets this possession happen, a few things occur, with the most important one being how quickly whatever went into her seems to focus on Riley. Riley is arguably the most vulnerable person here, at least in terms of him showing more fear than others do, and it's pretty clear from what happens throughout the film that the entities involved in this whole thing like to terrify people. And right off the bat, Sophie's delivery of this line would be enough to have me out the door before that 90 seconds was up.
I like you.
The speed at which this escalates, with her getting more and more unhinged at a rapid pace before doing something that I've definitely seen in other movies, but I'm not sure I've had it elicit the same sort of visceral panic that it does here. Good God almighty, she is incredible. The dilated pupil is a great touch as well, because it makes for a very uncanny, creepy look, but also because it's another reflection of the themes of drug use, since that's a pretty common side effect of many drugs. On top of how intense this sequence is, there is so much going on here that you won't know is happening until you have the context of the full story, so let's establish a couple more things and then take a closer look at some of what's going on here, along with Riley's eventual turn with the game. Essentially, where this is all heading is that there are entities on the other side of this game that seem to be drawn to Riley for one reason or another. It could be that he's young and more afraid than the others, and they enjoy tormenting people who are the most afraid of them, or it could be something entirely different. We don't really know. Their goal, once they see him through Mia's eyes, is to take his body over, and ultimately that's what these entities are hoping to do when this game is played. Because they're trapped in a sort of endless limbo, they're hoping to find someone whose body they can take over so that they can get out of that place, at least temporarily. The other thing to touch on is what happens when Riley eventually plays, which is that he seems to be possessed by the spirit of Mia's mother.
I miss you so much, me.
I'd be remiss to not mention how insanely good Joe Bird is, especially for his age at the time the movie was made. This is an incredibly demanding role, and he delivered with a performance that haunted me for quite a while after I first saw the movie. Never gonna forget that face. When he starts speaking to Mia, her mother's voice begins to break through, and because Mia so badly wants to speak with her mother again, she stops Haley from ending the game after 50 seconds, like the plan was, and this causes things to go very badly, very quickly. From what they said earlier on, 90 seconds is sort of the limit for how long a person can stay in the possessed state, because if you go longer than that, then the spirits may stay in your body. This is probably something that they heard about when they got the hand, and they never took the chance on testing whether or not it was true, so they've stuck to that 90-second rule. For another piece of really smart drug metaphors, having things get bad for Riley before 90 seconds is something you can sort of think about from the angle of drug dosages, because older people and those who often use are able to handle more, generally speaking, but Riley is younger and inexperienced, and he's smaller than the others, so for him, a shorter amount of time leaves him as vulnerable as they would be with more. They did such a good job at handling this angle of the movie. So after this conversation with who seems to be Mia's mother, everything takes a very sudden shift, and honestly, this was one of the tougher scenes for me to watch in a major release horror movie in the past few years. It's interesting because while this is something supernatural that's going on, I felt like it captured the feeling of when you're young and something dangerous you were doing suddenly took a really bad turn, and now you're in way over your head. The sense of pure icy panic and the dread that comes from this sequence is something that's very impressive to see in a feature film debut. Pretty sure I can't actually show a fair bit of what happens here, but the practical effects that they designed for the things that happen to Riley are fantastic, and it's clear they took their years of experience with this kind of thing on their YouTube channel and applied it here. Part of what I found made this so good is the fact that there's no music to speak of whatsoever during this sequence. The only sounds you get are the confused and panicked reactions from everyone around, and the awful sounds coming from the things that Riley is doing. The scene is also a great example of something that I think about a lot, because there's sort of this war between the extremes of people who love gory horror and say that those who prefer the slower psychological stuff are snobs, and people who love the psychological slow burns, and say that the gore lovers are too TikTok brained to appreciate storytelling. I disagree with both sides. All horror is awesome. But the reason I'm bringing this up here is because I think that this sequence in Talk to Me is a perfect example of why the latter group is wrong. Because it's a very graphic and gory sequence, but the violence isn't being used in the same way that it is in something like Terrifier. It's not used to just gross out the audience and make you go, ew. It's made to actually scare you and put you in the shoes of people who naively played with fire and are now getting burned for it. Gore can be genuinely scary. It's not just a dumb schlock thing used to placate smooth-brained people, and this is a great example of that. So, from this point on, essentially the overall arc in this is that Mia is now wanting to reconnect with her mother, and Riley is slowly being killed by the entity that seemed to have found a home inside of him. According to Mia's mother, they will not leave, and the only way to free Riley from this torment is to kill him. Of course, we'll talk more about this, but with that established, I now want to go back and take a closer look at some very interesting details from earlier on. So the first thing that's important here is that moment when Mia first tried the game, and the entity that possessed her was drawn to Riley right away. Part of the reason that Mia truly believed it was her mother who possessed Riley was that her nickname was used, and that was a name that only her mother called her. The thing is though, with Mia having already tried the game out herself,
Talk to me.
she opened her mind to whatever was on the other end of that hand, and with her mother being such a prominent thought in her head at this point, it's no doubt that the nickname her mother used for her would be something floating around up there, and that's something that could be used against her, which is what we see happening during the possession scene. Because this is not her mother at all. It's the same spirit that possessed her when she tried it. I love the way they handle the brief glimpses at the spirits on the other side, with them being confused and looking like they don't know where they are, and this one right here is the one who possessed Mia. The reason that I think it's this one is because slowly throughout the film, the manifestation that Mia believes to truly be her mother slowly degrades and looks more rotten and waterlogged, as did the spirit who presumably died by drowning. In fact, there's even a scene with this manifestation of her mother where you can hear the sound of being underwater, which further leans into this spirit tricking Mia.
Mia?
We learn that the longer these things stay in your body for, the weaker they get, which is why the spirit's facade gets worse and worse as time goes on, and its true self begins to come through more clearly, and also why they ramp things up so quickly, because they're in a rush to get the body they covet before they lose the ability to do so. But it's not Mia that they want. It's Riley. It's pretty clear throughout the film that there is more than one spirit that's working on getting this, with this vile old man spirit being the one who has now attached itself to Riley while he's stuck in hell. Ultimately, what they're trying to manipulate Mia into doing is killing Riley so that they can have his soul and torment him forever. And the first step in doing so was to pretend to be Mia's mother and use a nickname that they found while they were possessing her for the first time. Because then they're essentially planting this seed of trust in someone who would already be likely far more willing to believe that it truly was her mother because of how badly she misses her. Now, they hurt Riley bad enough to have his psyche be disconnected from his body so they can hold him in a hellish limbo, and they need Mia to finish the job, so they hang on to that lie of her mother and slowly convince her that killing Riley is the good thing to do, that it's the only way to save him.
You're doing the right thing.
And that's essentially what we watch happen throughout the film, but what I love about how they went about this is that there's never any point where a character says out loud, "That's not your mom," or "They're lying to you," or something like that. It's just something that's conveyed through the design of the spirit over time, the sound design, and the little details in the narrative. Also, with this film touching on drug abuse from the perspective of feeling the need to make up for a lack of connection in other parts of your life, one of the ways that these spirits push Mia further into being willing to do what they're trying to get her to do is by isolating her from her friends and making her seem unstable and untrustworthy. Also, not part of the script, but I'm also realizing that them having this distorted version of her mother manifest is kind of a way to reflect the lie of the connection that drug use provides people for a temporary period of time. It may feel like it's filling that hole, but it's really nothing. It's just a distortion. Mia is very vulnerable at this point of her life, and things are taking advantage of her state of mind. The things she experiences while outside of the game are not shared by any of the others. Yet another point of great drug use symbolism, by the way, where some people are able to partake in things recreationally and not have it become something that bleeds into their everyday lives, while others are more susceptible to having it become a more consuming problem. The manipulation side of this film's story is something that we've seen in lots of possession movies, but I think largely because this one doesn't sit you down and explain exactly what's happening, it feels so much more effective here because it forces you as the viewer to see past the manipulation yourself by paying attention to things like character and sound design, and then you almost want to reach through the screen and tell Mia about what's happening. You want to warn her. That level of engagement just wouldn't be there if this whole thing was spelled out. And I think another thing that makes this so good is that the puzzle pieces aren't like deeply hidden or anything. I love really obscure stories, but not everything needs to be like that. And the way they approach this feels like a really healthy balance between asking the viewer to engage with the movie and making something that can be enjoyed by people who don't generally like movies that leave things up to the imagination. To be clear, I'm not saying one's better than the other, just bringing it up because I felt like Talk to Me handled this stuff in a way that can please both sides, which is great. We watch as these entities isolate Mia, ripping more of the connection from her life that was already suffering from a massive hole. After Riley is hurt, Jade is furious with Mia for letting him partake in the game after she very explicitly said he was not allowed to, a stance that she was clearly right to have. With Daniel's experience having him say some things that imply a preference for Mia, she's a little more drawn to him at the moment, and with Jade being so mad at her and feeling the need for company, she coaxes Daniel into spending the night with her because she's afraid. It's important to note that at no point in the movie is there any implication that those who are possessed express repressed thoughts. So I don't think that what was happening was necessarily a reflection of Daniel's true feelings. However, it is possible that, like how the spirit in Mia found the nickname her mother gave her, Daniel's feelings on the subject are probably complex, and to some degree there's still a draw towards Mia, and the spirits could have just gone full blast with that to draw a wedge between the three of them. Based on the way he acts, I don't really think it's hard to infer that he still has feelings for her. During the night, Mia sees the very unsettling sight of a spirit crawling from a dark corner and doing this. But it turns out that Mia is actually the one doing it, and this is another part of the way that the entity is isolating Mia. This is something that makes it seem like she's losing her grip on reality and is also betraying the trust of her friend and like destroying her circle, and Daniel isn't exactly trying to hide what happened, as he shares it pretty willingly when the group is talking about whether they've seen things outside of playing the game.
I woke up and Mia was, I don't know, sucking my feet.
This is how they're making the others not want to be around Mia. The opening of the film, which I haven't even talked about yet, is this fantastic one-shot at a party where someone is looking for their brother and finds him locked in a room talking about spirits, and he then stabs his brother and takes himself out. It's a really great one-shot, by the way, very well executed. The brother who was stabbed survived, and the group finds him, hoping that he'll be able to help them with what's happening to Mia now, but with how things went for him, that makes it so that now the others don't really want to be around Mia since she could become dangerous very soon. This scene also has quite a big fight between Jade and Mia, and it's a really goddamn sad scene with so much emotional complexity where I don't actually think that the things Jade is saying are entirely unfair, even if the way she's saying them is very cruel, but also Mia's not wrong for behaving the way she has in the wake of her mother. This gradual isolation comes to a head right before the climax of the film. After Mia's father reveals to her a note that was left behind by her mother that made it pretty clear that her overdose was not accidental, she locks herself away in a room where the thing pretending to be the spirit of her mother tells her that he's lying.
That's not your dad.
This whole thing results in her father breaking down the door just in time to get stabbed in the neck with a pair of scissors. Tragedy of it aside for a moment, I love how they use this as a sort of ironic mirroring of what happened when Mia's mother died, where her father tried to break down the door after realizing that something was wrong, but was unable to before it was too late. Here, he did manage to get the door down before his loved one was harmed, but all that happened was that he, in turn, was hurt for it. This is the straw that breaks the camel's back, and I love how they use this moment of utter unreality in Mia's head as she tries to process what just happened. This is the moment where she is undoubtedly the most mentally vulnerable, and what I think makes this such a chilling moment is because it makes perfect sense that this would cause her to go along with the plan that these spirits have been working towards. Everything of the life that she's known is gone in this moment. She's already been struggling with the death of her mother. Her friends are distancing themselves from her, and Jade just ripped her apart. And now, at least as she's aware, her father is dead. Nothing makes sense, nothing is familiar, and so in this moment, all she can do is latch on to the one thing that actually has some sense of structure to it, that being her given duty of killing Riley. It's at the very least something that makes sense, while everything else around her is completely unrecognizable. We'll get back around to that in a bit to talk about the film's ending, but I want to touch more on Riley's possession and how well they handle this. It's without a doubt one of the most disturbing portrayals of a possession that I've seen in a very long time, and a huge part of why this works so well is because of how well they fleshed out these characters and their dynamics earlier on, and how harrowing the reactions from the people around Riley who love him are. All of the initial scenes after his possession are rough, but it's where he hurts himself again in the hospital that I had a really hard time with because of how strong the sense of dread and hopelessness is established with how his mother and sister have just no idea how they're meant to help him. Again, it's not like we haven't seen things like this before, but there's something so raw about the way they're presented in this movie that makes them more impactful than in a lot of other cases. Talk to Me is a movie that strikes a fantastic balance of a grounded possession film while also slowly going further and further into this sort of disconnected dreamscape feeling to put the viewer in Mia's shoes as she's ripped from the life she knew. But there's one moment where shit gets absolutely insane, and the way they went about it was brilliant. One of the ideas that Mia has in regards to freeing Riley is that they can play the game with him again, thinking that they may not have properly ended the ritual last time and that they could potentially close the door. So she plays in the hospital and is met with a young girl who offers to show Mia where Riley is. Now, originally, there was a hell of a lot more footage that was going to be shown here. What we got is not a whole lot more than a few flashes, and there is some really gnarly shit going on, but a lot of this wound up being cut from the movie because it would make getting an R rating pretty difficult for them, and so they had to tone it way back. Of course, I want to see what they shot, and maybe an extended version can come out at some point, an unrated cut, and then we can get the full scene restored. However, I actually think that in a lot of ways, this cut was to the benefit of the film. Because it's such a massively different visual than everything else we see in the movie, and it's so nasty and intense, just getting a brief moment of it leaves an impression that I'm not sure would have hit quite as hard if there had been more footage here. It's one of those things where I would like to see more, but honestly only out of curiosity and not out of the feeling that I think it would have made the movie better. Getting this flash of a really harrowing portrayal of hell and being slapped in the face with the reality that while everything is going on, Riley is trapped in this unfathomable horror that he doesn't have a clear path out of. And just an image of him trapped under a pile of disgusting, horrific spirits pulling and prodding at him is enough for the scene to hit really hard.
I'm never gonna stop.
It's one of the most haunting reveals I've honestly ever seen. It's a bone-chilling sequence and a deeply disturbing portrayal of hell. Just before getting into the film's ending, I want to touch on a couple of other things in regards to the way this movie handles its visual storytelling as well as the scares. I mentioned earlier how much I liked the way they handled showing the disconnect between Mia and her father, and there's another somewhat similar example to that which I found to be really effective during the dream sequence where the toe-sucking spirit comes out to play. Before that happened, Mia was dreaming about her and Daniel being together again, and there's this great moment where part of the dream shifts and she sees the sight of her mother's death in the hallway, and as soon as this happens, Daniel is now facing away from her and he fades into nothingness. It's a great way of showing how her connections began to fade away after her mother died, and they're also leaning into the guilt of what she's feeling at the moment with what happened to Riley by focusing on the blood on her hands. On that topic, while watching the director's commentary, there were some things that were pointed out regarding the blood in the sink when she's washing her hands after Riley got hurt, and while they didn't say what it was, it looks to me almost like these 4 drops were intentionally made to look like a hand reaching out, connecting to the ritual itself and how it's beginning to take over Mia's life outside of the time when she's engaging with it. They also mentioned significance with Mia's nails, and there is a lot of focus on her painting them and scratching it off throughout the film. But I'm not quite sure exactly what this was meant to convey. I had a couple of different ideas, but then each time I thought I was onto something, it would focus in another scene, and I was like, okay, well then it doesn't make sense there, so I don't know. I'm assuming it has something to do with her connections with others, since Jade does them up at one point, and as the movie goes on, they get more messed up, but I'm not totally sure. By the way, without a doubt, one of my favorite director's commentaries, solely because it is so damn entertaining. You want to talk about goofy sibling banter? Sit down and watch this commentary track. It is so worth it.
Bring it up. I'm not going to say what it is, but there's something going on here, guys. If I said that,
you didn't write the film. You didn't write the film.
The stake.
So you talk about the practical side.
So in terms of how scary this movie actually is, I think I've made it pretty clear by now that I find it to be really effective where that's concerned, to the point that I was surprised by how unsettling I found it when I rewatched it for the first time since it came out. There is such a bleak, oppressive, lonely atmosphere to this film that felt like it was conveying the manipulation of a vulnerable person who so badly needed connection in a genuinely disturbing way. I love the detail of the spirits looking confused when they get summoned for the game, and while there are jump scares and there is gore, not any instance of either of these felt like it was being used in place of crafting genuine scares. They handled these things right, and God almighty, do these 2 guys ever know how to craft a scare. The movie is unsettling, it's upsetting, it's bleak, it's extremely effective from a horror standpoint, and I have no issue saying that it's far scarier than the vast majority of major release horror movies that have come out over the last few years. I watch so many damn horror movies, so when one can actually get under my skin, it makes me really excited. Alright. It's time to talk about the film's ending. Following what happened with her father, Mia makes her way to the hospital and tricks Jade into leaving Riley on his own by saying she needs to see her. And when Jade discovers Mia's father and realizes that Mia's not even here, she calls Sue in a well-deserved panic. There are a couple of moments here that are just great, with Mia being at Riley's side and then Sue coming in and apologizing for letting loose on her earlier.
I'm so sorry that I blamed you. I know that you wouldn't do anything to hurt him.
Pretty haunting moment because we know what she's here to do, and to see Riley's mom talking like this with absolutely no knowledge of it is haunting. Then when Jade calls Sue to warn her and Sue says that Mia is here with Riley.
Yeah, she's with Riley.
Man, it's just so good. This movie captures grounded panic in a way that you just don't see very often. Mia takes Riley to the edge of the highway and prepares to do what she's being told will free him, while the drowned spirit and the old man possessing Riley push further. It's been a while now, so the spirit in Mia is really losing its strength, and its true form is showing a hell of a lot more here, and it's pretty fucking nasty. They play this moment super well, with Jade running towards her in panic, and we see something hit a car and cause an accident, but it's revealed that this was Mia jumping into traffic instead of her pushing Riley. I'm not entirely sure that she saw through the manipulation here, and what I think happened is that this is tying back directly to the start of the movie, where Mia was unable to kill the kangaroo. Once again, she can't bring herself to do it despite what she believes is happening to Riley, and so instead of not doing it and then having to live in the reality that she let Riley suffer eternally in hell and having to live with what she believes to be the loss of her father, she decides she can't take it anymore and calls it quits. There's a great detail here when she gets up from the street with the people running over to where she was laying. They aren't looking at her or going towards her. They're all laser focused on where she landed, which is a really cool way of showing that this is now her in spirit form and her body is laying dead in the middle of the highway. As her world begins to fade away from her, we learn that Riley managed to recover because the timer on his possession ran out, and that Mia's father actually survived what happened. And we get this horribly depressing shot of him entering an elevator with this dead look on his face. He may have survived, but this is a man who lost his wife and his daughter, and that's a tough life to live out. The final scene of the movie shows Mia in a dark, empty, infinite nothingness, wandering aimlessly in search of something, and off in the distance, she sees a table with a hand outstretched, lit only by a candle, and when she grabs the hand, she finds herself face to face with someone playing with what seems to be another hand.
I'll let you in.
This final scene really ties the whole thing together because it shows how frightening and alone this existence is and leaves no room to question why anyone would be willing to do something horrible to be in a body for just a little bit of time. Also, it perfectly wraps up the addiction themes because now the world only exists to her through the hand. She has nothing else, no connection, no light, and the only way she can see anything is when she joins in from the other side and partakes once again, showing how some people completely lose themselves and only exist for the next hit. Talk to Me is without a doubt one of the movies that's going to be talked about when we look back on this decade in horror in 20, 30 years' time. It's a tight runtime that is packed to the brim with zero fluff, a very poignant, tragic, and impactful exploration of addiction and connection, a really solid cast of characters, and an ending that's pretty much perfect for the story they were telling. Even the title is perfect because it's a reflection of the themes of connection and how people often fall into addiction hoping that it will fill a void. Talk to me. Please, someone, talk to me. I have to admit, even though I really liked it the first time around, I didn't feel much of an inclination to revisit it, and now having done so, I can easily say I have a much deeper appreciation for this movie a few years out than I initially did. It's honestly brilliant, and it's an insane debut for these two filmmakers, and I am so excited to see what they do next. There is a sequel in development, and because they set up multiple hands existing, this makes perfect sense. This idea opens up so many possibilities for thematic exploration, so I'm very curious to see what angle they'll take next time. Talk to Me is fucking fantastic. Thanks for watching through to the end. I hope you enjoyed the video enough that you want to see more, and if that's the case, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell because YouTube can sometimes suck at recommending channels. A huge thank you to my wonderful Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members who are a massive help in allowing me to continue committing as much time as I can to making these videos. If you want to gain access to things like behind the scenes material or gain early access to my videos, consider supporting me on either platform. As always, thank you for stopping by Rocklin Graves. I hope you've enjoyed your stay.